Welcome to the UIAAA Connection podcast. Hometown Ticketing is proud to be the exclusive sponsor of the UIAAA Connection podcast and to provide schools nationwide with the best options for digital ticketing for their events. Visit their website at hometownticketing.com to learn how they can make digital ticketing possible and simple at your school. Thank you to Hometown Ticketing for their exclusive sponsorship of the UIAAA Connection podcast.
Welcome to another edition of the UIAAA Connection. I'm your host, Mark Hutch Hunter. Today, we are pleased to have as our guest Cheryl Van Paris from the NIAAA office, specializing in certification. Welcome to the podcast, Cheryl.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you for being here. Why don't you begin by sharing with our audience where you grew up, where you went to college, your first job, those types of things.
Well, I grew up in a large town in Indiana called North Manchester. We have a college there, Manchester College, which I did not attend. I graduated from Purdue University in 1982. And my first official job, I worked at the Indiana Convention Center and Hoosier Dome starting in 1983 or 84. And I happened to be there when the Colts moved from Baltimore to Indianapolis. So that was kind of, that was fun. That was a lot of fun those years.
Well, expand on that a little bit. Like, were you there when because I know my memory is you saw the moving vans leaving Baltimore, but I assume those same vans showed up in Indianapolis. How'd that work?
That's correct. One of our board members of, it's called the Capital Improvement Board, or the CIB. One of our board members was the CEO of Mayflower Transit. So they dispatched, from what I understand, they dispatched trucks from all over to go to Baltimore, and they all took different routes to Indianapolis. So they couldn't, I guess, ambush them on their way. So they all went a different direction, and they all ended up here at a, since we had the Hoosier Dome, but they didn't have an official office. They used a old elementary building for their offices until the Colts complex could be built.
Fascinating. Why don't you share with our listeners here in Utah and across the nation, any time you spend in youth sports, at least your sports background, high school, college?
I have to say, I started off being the middle child. My dad would hit fly balls to my brother in our front yard. And he was about 5 years older than I. And of course, I wanted to do something with my dad and my brother. So I would shag flies in our front yard to, just to be able to, participate with them. And then I started off playing softball when I was like 9. And then in high school, I ran track. I did a little cheerleading. But I have to say, I have always enjoyed sports. My mother, not my father, got me started watching football. My dad was on our school board, and they were always on Monday nights. So my mother had Monday nights free. So we would watch Monday Night Football, all three of us.
I love it.
While my dad was at school board meetings.
Okay, so did you play it all in college?
I did not, but I did graduate. Like I said, I graduated from Purdue, go boiler up. And, I've always just had a love of sports. And funny thing, this weekend, my husband and I were in Nashville, and Georgia was playing Vanderbilt. And we're sitting at this restaurant, and a bartender says, "So what are you guys going to do the rest of the evening?" And I said, "Well," if it was up to me, I just go find a sports bar and watch football. And the guy sitting next to my husband, who was a Georgia fan, said, "Dude, you are so lucky. She's perfect." So, so I just always have had a love for sports. I just, that's something we like to do together.
That's great. Now, share with our listeners some of the mentors you had in your life, teachers, coaches, parents, those type of people that had really a big influence on you.
I have to say both of my parents, with my dad, working with me out in the front yard, my mother, she didn't want us to watch other kind of TV shows. So we watch sports together, have always done that. And then I've always just been love watching Purdue football and basketball when I was there. So I've just always had that great, that. And then I have to say one of my mentors, she did participate in sports, but probably my first boss, Gloria Mills, when I was at the convention center, was a big influence in my life.
Very good. Let me ask you this. So you're working for the convention center,
Mm-hmm.
and all of a sudden this job at the NIAAA opens up, and this has got to be 15 years ago, or is it longer?
Well, let's see. I was at the convention center from 84 to 89, 91. I left in 91. Then I, of course, had a son, and
Right.
we kind of moved around. And then I worked for a property management company back when I was in 91 through 93. And that's how I met Patty Conrad, who is in charge of the national conference and other things in our office. And we always just kind of, laughed about, hey, wouldn't it be great, sometime down the road if we could work together again. And Patty happened to be working at the NIAAA when the position opened up in 2010 when Fran retired. And she said, you may want to think about, if this is what you want to do, you may want to think about, applying. And that's how the whole thing kind of got started.
And so if my memory serves me correct, and remember, I'm 68, so it's fading a little bit, but
That's
so
okay.
you came on board, my memory is you came on board during the time that I was serving on the board.
That's correct. I started March of 2010. May of 2010.
And it was back, for those of our listeners that have been to the national office, it was back when Mike's office in that conference room was the boardroom. And of course, the boardroom that we have now wasn't part of the office then.
That's correct. That's right.
And so reflect back on the job of an athletic administrator today, and give us your perspective working in the national office, how that's changed just in the past 11 years that you've been there.
I can't imagine trying to be an athletic administrator, especially I have to say now with COVID and all the things we've had to go through. But even before that, there's just so many things that that are involved that I don't think a lot of people understand. And that's it's tough. I can't imagine everything that they have to do and be careful for. That's the reason why we have things like LTC 504. So they understand those. There's just a lot of legal things I don't think a lot of ADs understand until they get into the position.
And then, of course, once they get into the position and they take the 504, then they run to their principal and say, I'm not sure I want this job anymore.
Of which I have heard those stories.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure you have. We both have. So speak a little bit about your journey with the NIAAA. Maybe share some of the stories you've had, because you get the advantage of working with people across the United States and, of course, now internationally. So you can even share some bad stories if you want, but to talk about the great stories, the interaction you have with the people from all over the U.S. and how that's built the association.
Sorry about that, Mark. I have to say that was the one thing I missed the most during COVID was the people connection that I've always had at the conference. It was just so difficult. And, I have to say, I love our members. Yes, there are some that, it's like with anything, but for the most part, our members are wonderful. And the international they've added new spice to what we do. I mean, they have a different perspective than an AD here in the States does. That doesn't mean it's wrong. It's just different. So,
It's different.
I mean,
sure.
but everybody eventually is always the same. It's always about the kids. And that's the one thing I have to say. Everybody always says it's all about the kids. Whatever we can do to help the kids is what I'm here for.
And so how is give me your perspective for those listening to the podcast. They may or may not be aware that you'll be leaving the NIAAA soon. Well, by the time this broadcast, it'll probably be, you'll only have 1 or 2 months left. And so share with them how tough that is going to be to leave. And I mentioned that because I was at your home, not probably 2.5, 3 weeks ago when the coordinators were back there. And what a big thing to host the coordinators at your house. There was at least 70 or 80 of us, but talk about those things.
As I've said, and whenever I have spoke to some of the different groups, I hate to say this, but I am not going to miss printing certificates nor hearing the question, how do I become an athletic administrator? Guys, I don't know. That's something you're going to have to figure out on your own, but it's the connection I have with our members. It's every time I have to speak at these, I get really choked up, and it's really difficult because for whatever reason, I just have a great connection with our members, especially the state coordinators and president and past board members. You're all just wonderful people. And that's the part that I'm going to miss the most.
Well, it's a people business. And I've mentioned this on 2 other guests that we've had on our podcast. I try to explain to someone outside the NIAAA what the NIAAA family is, and you explain what happens, and you explain that closeness and that tight-knit community, and they look at you and they say, well, that's not, you're just making that up. And I'm saying, no, it's something that you, I guess, unless you're a member of the NIAAA, you really don't get that.
No. I think one of our past board members, Cheryl Nance, who we both know,
Yes.
He made the comment once. He said, I could go to any state in the union and call up this AD, and if I had to, they could either find me a place to stay or they would invite me to their house. And he said, and that's just part of the family that we have. That's and I have to say, at this point, I probably could do the same. I could probably call up a number of people in Utah. I could call up a couple of the different ADs, including yourself, and you would either find me a place or you would invite me to your home. I mean, that's how close we are.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Now, share with some of our listeners, well, all of our listeners, some of the ideas, I said that wrong. Share some of the best practices with all of our listeners that are from the NIAAA, and some of the things maybe that have just come in the past 4 or 5 years that we're trying to stay on top of.
I have to say, everybody, if you are not at this point, please get certified. Become involved with your state association, and then move on to the national. I think it's so important that you make that connection in your state. What I have found, especially with the certification committee members and viewing our CMAA, the new oral presentation, is athletic directors love to steal ideas from each other. So I think that networking is very important, because somebody may be doing something at their school that they don't think it's a big deal. They've been doing it for years, but for somebody else, they're not doing it. And maybe it's something that could help them in their program.
Very well said. I can't overemphasize and agree with you more about the networking piece, because you talked about, Daryl, and I would say that's true with me, except for maybe I don't know anybody in Alaska. but I'm good in the other 48 states, and actually in some of the foreign countries now, because I'm familiar with some of the international people. So
Right.
what's name one or two of the favorite things about your current job?
I love sending out the return after somebody's taken an exam, either online through ProctorU or through the state. I love sending out that email that says, congratulations, you are now a CAA. And the same thing with the CMAAs. I mean, those are probably my two favorite things I get to do. I mean, I get to be the first person, other than for CMAAs, it could have been their reviewer, to congratulate them on achieving that designation.
Yeah, that's got to be sweet. So let me ask you this. If you could share two practices with a new athletic administrator. I want to say a new athletic administrator is someone between maybe 1 and 4 years. Two essentials. I know you've alluded to maybe a couple of these things, but what two things does a new AD have to have in order to become successful?
I really think they need a mentor, whether it be in their conference, somebody in their school district or in their state, to help them. And then if nothing else in the first 4 years, take the required courses for the CAA. I think those are all very important courses that they can implement in their programs or can help them with their programs.
Let me change the subject just a second on more of a personal level.
Okay.
What's your biggest failure, and what did you learn from that in your professional career?
The biggest failure.
It's kind of off script. I know it wasn't in the talking points.
Thanks, Mark.
Or maybe biggest disappointment then.
Biggest disappointment. Well, I don't know if it's a disappointment. My biggest problem I have is telling anybody no. So I have to say the down part of my job is that I have to let somebody know that they didn't pass the exam. That is so hard. I hate even having to send that email out. That's really difficult.
Yeah. And so is there anything positive you've gained from that? Because I can't imagine that's got to be a tough, communication or even phone call on a possibly occasion.
It's finding out that so everybody here is more than likely at some point been a teacher. So we all understand everybody learns in a different way. And same thing, everybody tests in a different way. So somebody who may have a problem with reading and connecting, it's finding out that there's ADs also have learning disabilities. And it's finding the way for them to take the exam to help them pass. Because we've had a few who have taken the exam, didn't pass. And we also have an alternative, is if we read the questions to them, they're more auditory rather than visual.
Sure.
They pass usually with blind colors. So that's the thing, is just finding the way to help somebody get to that point.
Very well said. Let me give you a moment now to speak to our audience here in Utah and nationally about the upcoming conference in Denver. Of course, you and I realize it may be a total day of a hug fest, since it's been 2 years since we've met, but this is your time to talk about the national conference, what it's like in the office to roll that out, and what a big deal it is for the NIAAA and for the members that are going to be there.
Well, if you were here in the office, I mean, I think there's a misconception about how large our office is, but you've been there. It is not that large of an office. I mean, we're a very efficient staff of 8. If you were to come here during, especially starting in October through when we have to take everything down to the Federation to load on the trucks, the boardroom that we have now is nothing full but of boxes. And everything is stationed in different sections, like there's the LTI section, there's the awards. I mean, it's like organized chaos. That's like Phil's thing. He loves doing that. So we let Phil do all the logistics and but from the once you get to the conference, it's the greatest networking you will ever experience. And yes, I will have to purchase a lot of waterproof mascara because there will be a lot of hugging and a lot of crying. But that's the thing that I think we all enjoy most is just the connection between the people. I mean, learning is yes, but it's the networking and the interaction that we have is the best.
Well, let's finish up with this question then. What question should I have asked you that I failed to ask you? Or what do you want to add to the interview that we didn't talk about?
I just have to say, sign up to come to the conference and find out what you're missing, because it's truly a great experience. I think once you do that the first time, you're hooked and you'll want to keep coming back.
Couldn't have said it better myself. We'll end on that note. That finishes another edition of the UIAAA Connection. Once again, our guest has been Cheryl Van Paris from the NIAAA office. Cheryl, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, Mark.
For our listeners, we hope you tune in next week for another edition of the UIAAA Connection.